Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so if you've even casually glanced at the news lately, you absolutely know everyone is talking about Keir Starmer's stunningly rapid resignation. But today, we are completely skipping the gossip, the endless rumors, and all those shouting talking heads. Instead, we're going to do a structural teardown of what actually happened. Because the real story here, according to the fascinating analysis we're digging into today, isn't really about one man at all. It's literally about the hidden machinery of modern governance itself. Think about this for just a second. How exactly does a historic, massive parliamentary majority, won in July 2024, just completely evaporate in 2 short years? I mean, Starmer entered office promising to be the ultimate stabilizer after years of conservative turmoil. It was supposed to be a return to normal. Yet, 24 months later, the whole equilibrium shattered. So why do massive political majorities now collapse so quickly? To answer that, we have to look way below the surface. Here is our roadmap for dismantling this machine today. Number 1, the surface story. 2, the hidden information machine. 3, the technocratic trap. 4, the regional rebellion. And 5, the great democratic paradox. All right, section 1, the surface story. So the standard narrative you hear everywhere is pretty straightforward, right? Voters were completely exhausted by constant drama, so Starmer offered them serious, predictable competence. But as the source material points out, politics has a really nasty habit of completely changing the question on you. You see, winning an election requires a totally different set of skills than actually governing. Winning is all about campaigning, keeping energy high, and pushing a simple, compelling narrative. Governing, well, that's just slow administration. It's about navigating really complex trade-offs. The public essentially wants the thrill of a campaign, but the reality of running a country is mostly quiet paperwork. And that massive disconnect is exactly where the trouble begins. Now, to be totally fair here, the analysis notes that many argue Starmer's administration was actually highly capable on paper. The data shows they pulled off the fastest reduction in NHS waiting lists in almost 20 years. They also secured substantial expansions of both workers' and renters' rights. So from a purely administrative standpoint, these are genuinely significant structural victories. Take the number 2.6%. That represents the percentage of GDP that defense spending was raised to under Starmer. That is the largest single expansion since the Cold War, done to deal with intense international conflicts in places like Ukraine and Iran. But here is the catch. The analysis highlights that these were ultimately isolated successes. Without a cohesive national narrative, a real story to explain why any of this actually matters to a normal person's daily life, these genuine policy wins just totally failed to build lasting public loyalty. Which brings us to section 2, the hidden information machine. Let's peel back a layer and look at the actual conflicting incentive structures running modern politics. In this ecosystem, every single participant is optimizing for something completely different. Politicians are optimizing for power. Journalists, they're optimizing for attention. Social media platforms are optimizing for pure engagement. And voters? Well, we just want better outcomes for our lives. Notice the friction there? A quietly functioning bureaucracy making slow, steady progress doesn't generate viral headlines, and it definitely doesn't farm social media engagement. Drama, conflict, and crisis do. So the entire environment fundamentally rewards the exact opposite behaviors needed for good, effective governments. So the absolutely crucial point here is this deep structural conflict in how time works. Real government operates on a really slow timeline. We're talking long-term administration measured in years. But our modern media ecosystem, that operates on an immediate emotional reaction timeline, measured in minutes. Every single policy is instantly dissected, and every minor mistake is amplified. Politicians end up totally trapped between a system designed for slow administration and a communication network designed for instant, hyper-accelerated emotion. There is a quote from the analysis that I really want to just let breathe for a second. The political marketplace, therefore, rewards certainty even when certainty is unjustified. Human psychology just craves confidence, simple stories over complex nuance. Because of this, Starmer's super cautious, legalistic, and highly professional style, literally the traits that helped him rise to the top, became a severe liability. He acknowledged complexity, which tragically made him appear weak in a media ecosystem that relentlessly demands simple emotional certainty. All right, let's go even deeper. Section 3, the technocratic trap.
The source material uses a very specific piece of jargon here called fiscal nominalism. In plain English, it means prioritizing abstract deficit targets and international bond yields over actual, on-the-ground domestic investment. By refusing to break with orthodox economic rules just to keep the international markets happy, labor essentially forced itself into an era of invisible austerity. They had to make incredibly tough choices, like letting public sector wages stagnate in real terms and capping winter fuel allowances. And you know what that did? It directly alienated their own core voters, starving their political project of the resources they needed to deliver visible change to struggling communities. This economic straitjacket builds into what the analysis calls hyper-rationalized incrementalism. Basically, it's the deeply managerial belief that you can solve massive historic crises just by making slow, regulatory tweaks and doing structural reviews, all without any strong, unifying ideology. But here's the reality. When times are tough, like during a massive inflation or energy crisis, a purely managerial administration just lacks the rhetorical power to justify societal sacrifices to the public. Being good at paperwork simply isn't enough to hold a country together when people's material conditions are actually deteriorating. Which leads us to the breaking point. Section 4, the regional rebellion. The catalyst that violently exposed all of these vulnerabilities was Mayor Andy Burnham's dramatic Makerfield by-election return to Westminster. And the key concept here is spatial alienation. This is the profound, fundamental disconnect between the highly centralized decision-making going on down in Westminster and the actual day-to-day economic reality of post-industrial Britain. The government's intense focus on process over real, local proximity left a massive ideological vacuum outside of London, and regional leaders, they expertly stepped right into that void.
You can see these two totally competing styles clashing. You've got Starmer's metropolitan institutionalism, which is centralized, legalistic, and frankly can feel incredibly distant to the average voter. Contrast that directly with Burnham's regional devolution. That approach is place-based, emotionally resonant, and fiercely protective of local economies. When Burnham launched his campaign, it showed the entire political machine that the ideological compass of the movement had completely shifted from London straight up to the north. Burnham didn't just offer lofty rhetoric. He offered a deeply localized platform. We're talking about abolishing business rates for single-site hospitality, stopping national insurance hikes on regional employers, and explicitly rejecting centralized fiscal constraints so that regions could control their own assets. This wasn't abstract policy to voters. This meant saving the corner pub and protecting the local factory jobs. By shifting the conversation from national administrative competence to regional empowerment, he successfully insulated his campaign against the right-wing populist threat of Reform UK. And it worked so well, it literally triggered the cabinet rebellion that ultimately ended Starmer's premiership. Finally, let's zoom all the way out. Section 5, the Great Democratic Paradox. We have to ask the really big macro question here. Does swapping out the leader actually fix any of this? The text calls this the Burnham illusion. It is so incredibly tempting to personalize structural problems, isn't it? It feels great to believe a new, energetic leader is the silver bullet. But the harsh reality is, changing the leader does not automatically mean you escape the machine. Whoever sits in that chair inherits the exact same media incentives, the exact same social media ecosystem, the exact same public impatience, and the exact same structural economic constraints. And all this rapid turnover creates profound second-order effects. It creates an instability loop. Step 1. Political instability makes future politicians incredibly cautious and risk-averse. Step 2. That risk aversion means they refuse to make bold, difficult decisions for long-term reform. Step 3. This inaction leads to massive public frustration. And step 4. That frustration causes even more political instability. It is a complete, vicious cycle that actively cripples a modern democracy's ability to tackle the big, long-term challenges, which, honestly, is exactly why big national problems never seem to actually get fixed for the everyday person. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought experiment based on the sources. Today, we have more access to information, more transparency, and more ways to scrutinize our leaders than at any point in human history. But are the very technologies meant to strengthen democracy actually destroying its capacity to govern? If the UK state completely dismantles its centralized Westminster model in favor of a deeply fragmented, regionalized system just to survive this modern pressure, will stable national leadership become permanently impossible? It is a massive question, and I highly encourage you to ponder what that means for the future of how we are governed. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.